How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we're going to talk about policies and when they conflict. Conflicting policies. I think a big time you're going to see it happening is when you have, let's say, custody and medical. Two very, very important departments in corrections, in our jails. And sometimes they both have tremendous liability in what they do. And having said that, sometimes their policies may conflict because one may need this outcome and the other may need another outcome. And what do you do, especially if you're in management and you're in the middle of this conflict? And again, both sides have valid points. And again, there is a liability no matter which way you go. And as management being in the middle, how do you make your decision? I think it's going to be a great dialogue, definitely something that we need because, guys, we do deal with this. I'm sure right now people that are watching this could talk about many times they had argued with the other department because they felt that, well, we got to do this. And the other department's like, well, wait a second. If you do this, then we can't do this. So I just want to get this discussion out there. I think it's good for middle management right now to understand, what it's like to be in that middle and then what it is that you can do to try to make sure that you're making a decision that doesn't just benefit one department, but really just benefits the agency, benefits the facility. And by the way, by benefiting the facility or the agency, it should benefit both departments. And we'll get to heated discussions where people they're just arguing that instead of us trying to help each other, it becomes a win-loss. And now we're out of context of ever meeting in the middle. This is just more about who's right and who's wrong. And that's where it really gets divisive. Like, we could disagree, but we should never be divided. We should disagree and grow, not disagree and divide. Okay, guys, so we have two sponsors. We have American Military University. Ooh, that's a small one. What happened there? Hold on one second, guys. That's an insult to my sponsor. Okay, guys, we have American Military University. Bam! There it is, right in my face. Guys, if you guys looking to get a degree, go back to college, seek higher education, maybe bring some experience back in the classroom, check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do on Tier Talk, but on a bigger scale, very supportive of what we do in the corrections community. And we also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And guys, we're also putting content out there as well. They also have a YouTube channel. I just put a video out there about the importance of evolving as opposed to change. And Russ also has a video out there about, he broke down a video, which is really good about, I think it's about defensive tactics or posture. I forget, but he just posted one up there. So if you guys get a chance, please check it out. Okay, we have our guest. There he is. What's up, James?
Angie, hi. What's going on?
It's good to have you, man. Hey, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience again?
Yeah, Butch Ferreira, 35, almost 36 years, Massachusetts Department of Corrections. Started as a correction officer, made it up through the ranks, and recently retired almost 2 Novembers ago. So as the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of the Northern Sector, I was responsible for about 8 different prisons, including maximum security, the female facility, and we had a couple of minimum and medium facilities mixed in as well.
All right. And guys, if you get a chance, you reminded me of something. We're always quick to say maximum facility and how tough we are. And if you watch yesterday's show, I kind of got shut down a little bit on that one. Guys, if you get a chance, you got to see the show we had yesterday with me, Connie. Randy Sutton was on for a little bit, but the focus was also on a gentleman named William Young, who has a channel called Just Corrections. It's about maintaining our sanity in corrections. I thought it was a really good discussion, hit home on a lot of topics. But when you said maximum security, some of us would like to brag. It says we work maximum security, and I'm big on that too. And I was like, wait a second, So I just reminded me of now I don't even want to say it anymore, but I still want to say it. Guys, I work in a maximum security prison. I don't give a shit, how you view me. Hey, real quick, so at the highest of levels, I mean, what's great is you actually worked as a correctional officer and you worked your way all the way up to the highest of levels where you're overseeing 8 facilities. I mean, now actually from the bottom up and obviously top down, how bad is it when you do get policies that wind up conflicting, and how does that even occur if we're all working for the same agency?
Yeah, so in corrections today, as you know, Ganj, there's a several different accreditation agencies, whether it's ACA, NCCHC, Joint Commission. There's a public health standards. There's a number, hundreds and hundreds of standards that govern prison operations. Now you can choose to be ACA or NCCHC, Joint Commission, all these different accreditation type organizations, which, in my personal opinion, are good things. So they have, but they have a book or a manual full of standards, with the exception of ACA, maybe the American Jail Association, but even jails have a set of standards in ACA. Other than ACA, the other accreditation agencies or companies, pretty much focus on a specific category. For example, NCCHC may be medical. Joint Commission, although medical would also, it can be medical, but it can be mental health, it can be ambulatory type care at facilities, and public health. In Massachusetts, they have Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations governing correctional facilities. So there's a myriad of standards that folks develop, and it's very likely that one standard will contradict another. And then a lot of times these standards, or the answer to standards, the practice or the actual procedure on how to meet the standard, ends up in agency policy. So there's a lot that, they focus. Sometimes they're done, maybe not with everyone's input or the appropriate input from custody when you're doing a medical standard or a medical policy. So they end up contradicting in actual language. And practice also is another way where they contradict. We may have procedures set up for certain things to take place, and the impact of those procedures may impact another operation or another part of the facility, like custody, for example. So that, unless you have a person in the central organization that's job it is to manage the agency policies and to ensure that policy changes or directives don't contradict each other, it can happen quite often.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, because I do like having that middle person, because I think a lot of policies, when they're developed at the highest level, you may have these different parts of the agency or these different departments that are responsible to answering to different areas that relate to where their experience is or their expertise is. And when they go to pass a policy down, they may only find that, okay, well, I need to make sure I settle these concerns. But then when it gets to the institutional level, these concerns start to kind of blend into maybe the operations of another department. Most of the time, you'll find the conflict usually sometimes has custody involved. I mean, because at the end of the day, all departments are going to have to work with custody to some extent or form. And custody does have that safety and security. I mean, that is the foundation of everything that we're doing. So anytime any policy has to get filtered down, it has to get filtered down through that bias of safety and security. But we'll get, in case there's times where there may need to be a shift. But I want to make sure I tell you that, of course, at all times, you should be looking at all policies within the scope of how can we make this work and be compliant with the needs of the facility. The sad thing is that sometimes when you have the people at top, they may only see their individualized function. And then when they pass it down in an isolated fashion, they don't see how it mingles with operations. Because again, when they write their policy, the funny thing is this, is that when you get a policy at the highest level, we may call it, let's say, a level 1 policy. The level 1 policy is pretty much something to guide that specific department. Now, when it filters down into the facility, that's where we're supposed to step up and, add to that policy. And I'm going to use the word because I'm more familiar with this, but we would call it, let's say, a level 3 policy. What the level 3 policy would do is it would help take this departmental policy, which may have been just isolated based on the departmental needs, but we will adapt it to the house. which means that we're going to have a sit down with everybody and then try to see what we can do to aid that department. Now, mind you, though, and I'll let you get your thoughts on this, James, is when that department sends that policy from above and we now have to adapt it to an operational policy. So now we're looking at the tactical side of it all. We have to remember, even as custody or whatever it is, that department that we're trying to assist, they're the lead on this. Now we have to show support in how to make that happen. We don't want to be resistant to something that they may need to implement. So what we need to do is at that point, we serve as a support function to make sure they're able to carry it out. And if by chance they can, at least we could show we tried at an exhaustive measure. But what's your thoughts on the policy traveling down and then creating a policy at the facility that involves the tactical side?
So what I'm familiar with, or what I think is successful, I guess I should say, is a process where when policies change, those suggestions of change, need to be sent out prior to them becoming official. They need to go to all of the division heads, and it should be clear of what the policy change is and what impact it may have on a specific operation. And then that's the time to comment. I always used to say, comment now, forever hold your peace, because if you don't, this policy is going to be enacted or finalized and approved. And then, you're going to have to deal with it that way. So a process in which changes are sent out for comment first before it becomes policy. And two is, I can give you an example where, it seems to always contradict, medical, obviously the medical folks, the doctors have the final say on medical treatment. And we wouldn't have it any other way because we're not doctors. However, there are some things that take place where there are some decisions made that drastically impact our ability to enhance or maintain public safety on occasion. So that's when it takes, a lot of discussion and education to educate the medical doctors on some of the things that we have in place to mitigate some of the impact on some of the medical decisions. I know that was kind of a lot there because I didn't want to, for example, some of the big things we had were the type and use of restraints while sick inmates, or inmates that had some mobility issues went out to outside hospitals. So we had to restrain these maximum security inmates or medium security inmates that needed to be in full restraints. Yet doctors would write doctor's orders, no restraints. Well, that was the worst case scenario. Or modifying restraints, or what type of transportation should be used for this particular inmate. One of the things that I found out is that the medical doctors really didn't have an understanding or the knowledge, or were never trained on what type of vehicles we actually have in our fleet. What type do we normally use for transportation? What are some of the things we can do to mitigate the impact of some of the restraints have on the inmate's medical condition? And twice a year we would bring in all the doctors in the department. They would have a monthly meeting, and twice a year we would go to that monthly meeting. They set up the transportation people set up a nice slideshow, had pictures. We brought vehicles down so that they could walk out there and see them. We talked about extensions on restraints. We talked about soft restraints. We talked about different types of restraints that we could use to mitigate some of that stuff. And once they were educated and informed, they made much better security type medical decisions with security in mind, and the process went smoother.
Yeah, I think the key is it's great to see that dialogue happen on top, but definitely the prison side, the facility itself is the one that's going to be carrying it out. So it's great to see 100% to see if we can try to, have that dialogue already up there. So it's less work on the facility, or maybe the dialogue could even eliminate a policy that's just so isolated in carrying out what's needed. So, but definitely when it gets carried down to the facility is the one that's ultimately going to be able to say if this can be carried out or not. I think the dialogue above is great because also, you know, the more informed you are about the policy, as I said, you know, about us working together, when you bring it down to the facility level, you know, you're kind of giving them a guidepost, you know, and then they just got to kind of figure out how they got to carry it out tactically. And I also know, guys, when you have conflicting policies, again, if we're not communicating up top, it's kind of, I always say it's kind of like at the range, you know, up close. If I'm off by an inch, it's not that big of a deal. But then when I'm all the way in the back and I'm shooting from the 25 or the 50-yard line, that inch off matters. I'm literally shooting all the way in someone else's target, probably a mile away. I mean, so, you know, we have to make sure that even the smallest things, you know, that little rock doesn't become a boulder. So we want to make sure that we eliminate what could be conflicts, you know, at any level. So when we get it down, we need to implement it. We're all on the same page, because front line is the one that's going to wind up being confused, because at the end of the day, I would like to think that we have staff that's very open-minded, but most of the time when you're a frontline professional, your main concern is going to be the duties that you have to carry out for the department that you work for. You know, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's great to have those frontline staff who know to look to left and right to try to understand how their piece of the puzzle affects this other person next to them who's from a whole nother department. But most of the time, what we wind up having is just frontline that's very, you know, I have to do this. This is what policy says for my department. And instead of us working together, we wind up having people jockeying for position. And then the sad thing is we don't resolve a matter, because when people are jockeying for position, we wind up having this win-loss mentality. And I want to give an example of a story I think worth sharing. And just a hypothetical. I'm not going to say it happened or it didn't happen. But I will say this. You may not realize a major conflict in policy until a mistake happens. And then when that mistake happens, you're going to have two departments that are going to be literally in survival mode. And neither one of them are going to be looking to compromise and give up the lead, because they're going to have both of them are going to have the same level of, or what they feel is the same heightened priority. And now we're looking to see where we can shift. So I'll give an example. One day, let's say medical made a call to bring an inmate in from, let's say, a community release, an inmate that was, had double hernia going on right now. Now, technically, the inmate could have, let's say, been brought to the local hospital. That would be procedure. It's an emergent situation. But at this point here, a mistake was made to have the inmate, let's say, come back to the facility. So now we have to escort the inmate into the facility. There's all these security procedures. So let's say the supervisor and the two officers to show support go over, and they see this inmate who's literally in pain. You could see the bulges right beneath their hips, so you know something's going on. And medical runs out and says, yo, I made a mistake. This guy should have been sent to the hospital. And this guy's literally screaming, but now we got to get them into the infirmary. But the problem is this inmate has to be strip frisked. This inmate has to be patted down. This inmate can't even move. So now you got two issues right now. You got the custody side saying, yo, we got a safety and security measure here because I got to strip this inmate. I got to make sure they got nothing on them. And medical's like, yo, he's suffering right now. We got to get him in. Now, to be honest with you, it's almost going to be impossible to strip this inmate or to do anything effective because he's got a double hernia and this person cannot move. So now you have two departments, right, with conflicting policies, safety and security. And at this point here, the inmates got to get that inmate in that building. So at the end of the day, what's the main thing? The preservation of life and the human element here. So we have to figure out at this point, we have a conflicting policy. I get it. But who needs to take the lead at this point? So do you think custody should step down and give the lead to medical? Or do you think medical should step down and give the lead to custody? Custody can always find some way to compromise a little bit. At this point, maybe get a wand, do whatever they can. But you got a guy in pain, violating the 8th Amendment, a bunch of stuff. So at this point here, custody Because again, the end result is going to be you have an inmate that's in pain. You can clearly see it. Now, don't get me wrong. Probable they can have something on them. I get it. But what's happening in the moment? What's happening in the moment is this inmate's got a double hernia, which you can clearly see, and you got to get into that infirmary immediately. So again, let's say the sergeant makes the decision. The sergeant maybe does a little jailing. Maybe we don't do the strip, but we do the wand. I'm not saying they're not going to go through any measure, but we definitely can't get this strip off. The inmate cannot move. We got to get him going. So we'll do a wand and compensate. Now here's the sad thing. Now, the sergeant or the person who led that needs to write exactly what happened. Not like, oh, hey, guys, we'll just do this and said we did it. No. Write exactly what happened. Hey, this is what happened. The inmate had a double hernia. And in order to bring him in, we had to get him in ASAP. And at this point, we couldn't do the strip frisk. So we supplemented. We did this, and this. And then we went ahead and, brought them into the infirmary. Now, granted, if you would have lied and said that you did these things when you didn't, you'd be in trouble for that because your reason was already justified as to why he couldn't go through it. Because now when we get the chance, we know that we have to give this guy a full pat down, a full strip, whatever the case may be. But you could see here that you have two conflicting policies, but where we come together literally is what is the end result that we want here? The end result matters. And at the end of the day, and I think James would agree, if we would spend time, like if I'm just going to sit there and argue my perspective and not be opened up to your perspective, let's say for medical, we go back and forth, it's no longer about the end result anymore, about helping this inmate getting where they have to be. Now it's about me proving I'm right, you proving you're right, and now we've shifted from working together, which we should be doing, to win-loss. So we're no longer even involved in the context of, hey, guys, medical may have made a mistake here. How do we help medical get this done? The last thing you want is when you have a situation like this where you feel the policies are conflicting for the two departments to now go in isolation. You want basically one department, whoever's department, we have to identify which department needs to take the lead and which department needs to show that support. So when that happened, the next question would be is, how do we help medical? We got to get that inmate in. What's your thoughts on that, James?
So think about, I was running through my mind, if it went bad. Think about if, those were the conditions and someone made a decision, just bring them in without any type of search or anything to mitigate, general practice or the basics, someone coming from the outside into a secure facility. Say the guy did have something, something that hurt other folks. That would have, so now medical's looking, oh my God, I didn't really realize it. And then security saying, see, I told you so. And that's not working together. So hopefully the process in which you described where, someone made the decision, although we're not going to be able to do a strip search on this guy, he can't even stand up, or it appears that he can't stand up. Let's get a wand or a very thorough pat search can be done. Even if, you had to move some things around just to get a visual, where you're relatively sure, other than up to a strip search, that he doesn't have anything. And even if he does have something, it's not something that's going to immediately create danger. That's the best way. And the most important piece is that someone at the right level makes that decision, and that it's documented that it actually took place.
Yeah, 100% spot on. And I think that's where it comes to also being able to empower that decision to occur, because that's another thing, guys. If you're not empowering your front line, or you're not empowering those that directly oversee the front line, the problem is when there are moments that should allow for discretion, they're going to always go back to policy because they're going to be afraid to go in and out. And a lot of times in corrections, half the things we do is really to bring things back into policy. So, we are going back and forth, but always in an effort to know that this is where we have to be. We're never going blindly. I always tell people, when you know where you have to end up, you're never truly lost. But the employment of discretion really does matter on you understanding policy, because if you don't know what the end game is, then you don't know if what you're doing is better or worse. So at this point here, the more that supervisor is empowered, and again, yes, of course, the great thing is of course they're going to call and let people know this is what I have to do. But having said that, for that sergeant or for that supervisor to be able to make that decision helps someone from a higher level who's not living it, who's not seeing it. And at that point there, especially if that was me getting the phone call, I would maybe thinking like, well, what can we get done? And here you go. You got this person saying, Gangi, I could do this, this, and this. And I'm thinking like, well, the end game is I got to get that inmate in. Hey, I appreciate that, Sarge. Let's do it. And they also, by the way, they were still able to compromise a little bit, but still get their job done. Right. So they never shifted from I'm right and you're wrong. It's more of, hey, guys, this is the person that has to take the lead.
Hopefully, one final comment. Hopefully, too, there's a process in place where, in my opinion, that's a medical emergency. I'm not saying it's life-threatening, a code 99 type of incident, but certainly, some type of notification over the public announcer, the radio system where, hey, I've got a medical emergency and this is what it is. Hopefully, you would cease all movement, secure the facility, the basics, so that, ideally what you described, the lieutenant tells the sergeant, get out there and do A, B, C, and D. And at the same time, the lieutenant's calling the captain saying, this is what I got and this is what I did. Those are ideal conditions. And that's all working together. We get the guy in. There was a mistake made. We don't have we don't have a death or some type of sentinel event. And certainly in the long run too, probably save some money.
Right. I think what's key here, guys, is even if something bad was to happen, the choice based on good intent would easily be justified. Because at the end of the day, imagine stripping this inmate who's in constant pain and who's screaming, basically the visual of that, if that was to ever be seen out there. So I do believe that the choice, even if it wasn't understood at the institutional level or the agency level, when it gets to the highest level, someone's going to understand why that choice was made. But I would truly believe that even if there was a negative outcome, I believe the agency would have your back at that point. Because like you said, James, at the end of the day, you have the life of that inmate. And obviously you're also seeing, like, I'm not a doctor. All right, let's just say, but if I was the supervisor on the scene, I looked in, I see a guy, he appears to be screaming. He's got two bulges, coming out. I'm not a doctor, but I think something's wrong with him. Now, if he's faking it, hey, and it's funny because if he's faking it, hopefully I don't get in trouble for that because, that's bullshit. But having said that, I'm going on what's most likely, So yes, at the time when I made that choice, they could have had something.
And Gangi, you mentioned, you've got a medical professional, a nurse or a doctor telling you, we made a mistake.
Yes.
This guy's got to come in and this is the condition he's in. I mean, that's a lot of information to make a decision. I think that's enough to make a decision. And like I said, as long as it's being made at the right level, for the most part, when time permits, there's other times where time isn't going to permit. And, the ideal level, I should say. I shouldn't say the right level. I should say the ideal level. And that it's documented exactly what you did.
Yeah, you're covered. Because as I said, even though, let's say there's problems that they could have something, what's going on right now is he has to get in there. And also, even at the highest level, at management, you guys are employed with a level of discretion. Because sometimes policy, I'm not saying you're breaking policy. I want people to be aware with me. I'm not saying you're breaking policy. I always say it's an effort to bring things back in. But policy doesn't always have context to it. It doesn't. It doesn't always have context to it. So you're going to have to make a good faith effort sometimes. Here's the funny thing, guys. When you go to court, you can't always defend policy versus common sense, especially if you're in a leadership position. Because in a leadership position, you are appointed to make decisions that may travel a little outside, but they're common sense decisions within the context of, me being the policy person, let's say you're admin, you really got to know policy. The reason why you really got to know policy is you have to make a decision of policy's working or it's not working. And then if it's not, let me create a memo. But you are empowered to do that. You're empowered to say, hey, right now, basically what's going on, this ain't going to work for me. Why do you think, as I said, if we had two departments that are in conflict, the middle management, the person in the middle, is able to make the decision, which may at first, push aside another departmental policy, but administration or the higher level executive staff is put in a position where it's like, hey guys, at the end of the day, what is the right thing to do? The common sense, because here's the funny thing. As you get higher up, the front line they'll get judged by policy and procedure. I get it. But as the case elevates, they're going to start questioning those policies and procedures. Now the executive staff gets in and they have to defend their decisions. Now, if they're leaning on bad policies, they're held liable. Officers are good. They did what they had to do. Frontline's good. They did what they had to do. But us, we're not. So what we have to do is we have to really be ready to know, hey, policy is going to work today or it's not. But most of the time when we make a decision, when there is conflict, when there's a context that you've never dealt with before, you're making literally common sense decisions, and then you'll just have to be able to justify it. But here's the key, James. I want to ask you this. When you have conflict with policies and whatnot, as middle management, what I try to do is I bring everybody to the table and we ask them, what is the end result? Because we don't have an end result, then we don't know where we're at in the moment. We don't have any direction. So the problem is if the two departments are in conflict, or if you just have a policy that's not working, if you haven't established what it is that you want to get to, each department is going to go back to go where they want to be. But that may not be where we need. So here it is. Listen to the verbiage here. They may go back to where they want to be. So look at that. That's isolation. Management is going to want to bring it up to where we need to be. And that's as an agency, as a facility. And that's where you have to ask, just to get everybody on the same page, what is the outcome here? What is it that we need to get? And now, who's more in charge of that outcome? And now whoever's in charge of that outcome, everybody else at this table, you have to give that department the lead.
You got to
So what's your thoughts on that outcome?
I agree with you 100%. The leader, let's take a facility, for example, and let's use the warden or the superintendent. He's got to get that message out of what the end result needs to be, whether it's preservation of life. So and he's got to look at both sides, and preservation of life under the best circumstances of security. We can't, overlook everything because we have a whole institution with other inmates and staff that we have to protect, and even the public. So how do we get there? How do we get there together? And hopefully they could talk about what's your fears. What is it that's preventing you from getting on board so that we can get to this ultimate goal of preservation of life? In this circumstance, the inmate's got to get in and get to the infirmary. Custody, maybe the chief of custody, maybe the deputy of custody. What is it you're afraid of?
Yeah, I agree, guys. And it's you're never going to be able to move forward unless you know where you're going to.
Yeah.
So again,
you need an end result.
Right. And guys, I think that's it. When you're middle management and you're stuck in a situation where you feel that you're kind of confused as to what to do because there are these shifting priorities, a go-to is getting everybody on the same page as to what that end result needs to be. And then you go from there. Do not go any other way. Do not go, from the bottom up. Go from the top down. Define the journey by the destination, because you're going to be, if we're not all on the same page with what that outcome has to be, then everybody's going to shift priorities, because everybody is going to be more concerned about what their department needs. As the agency, we need things for the agency. We need to work together. That means I need all departments to work together. And the end result is always going to be, sad to say, but in this case here, not sad to say, because let's just do it, because that may have came out wrong, but the preservation of life, that's always going to be the key. Now, here's the thing too, guys, and I want to make sure we know this. When we're at the table and we're discussing whatever this concern is, and we're discussing the outcome, and the outcome deals with the preservation of life, and somebody wants to challenge that by what's probable, be careful with that. Because if you make an effort to lean on what's probable, I'll give you an example. An inmate looks like he's going to kill himself, but you know what? I believe he's faking. He's most likely he's going to attack me when I go in. Let's ignore him. You're done. Job is done, because that's not your job. Unfortunately, even if he is faking it or not, we have to go in there. We have to save our life, save that inmate's life. But again, we're controlled in doing it. If you think the inmate is going to come at you, then don't go in it alone. You have enough resources and tools, hopefully, to eliminate the probable so you can go at it in a very, very controlled manner. But sometimes what the issue happens here is that, let's say the end result is the preservation of life. That's the end result. That's what's surfaced. That's what we have to do. If you let what's probable stop you from doing that, and you have all these resources to, even if it is what's probable, you know what? You're not going to let this inmate die because there's a chance that what you see right now could be legit. And you're more concerned about the universal precaution side. What if they do this? Remember, guys, universal precaution is still an effort to move forward, just more controlled. So again, sometimes you're going to have people that are going to use what's probable as an excuse to stop. But when you have this heightened level, the possibility of, let's say, the preservation of life, you have to take the risk. But again, it's a calculated and controlled risk. I'm not telling you to open up the door and go at it alone. I'm telling you, call for backup and go in controlled. But what's your thoughts on the what's probable?
So that's a very good discussion, and good agency policy will have something for that, for those types of incidents. Now, it's not going to cover it. Of course, post orders don't cover everything. Policy doesn't cover everything. There's going to be situations, but that's a perfect example of what could happen. These guys didn't sit around thinking of that. Don't forget, on the custody side, these things have happened. People have faked injuries to where they could get access to now outside the facility, inside a hospital, and so on and so forth. They have faked suicide. So when the officer came in, they assaulted the officer to the point where they almost killed him. Those things have happened. These guys haven't sit back and said, oh, this could happen. They've read about it. They may even have witnessed it. And they've also been training that discusses that stuff. That's the same thing, I think, Gange, that medical and the other side of the house has to be informed of.
Yeah.
These aren't, these are real issues. It's certainly depending upon, if you're in a minimum security facility, those types of things are far less likely to happen. Not impossible to happen, but you're in a medium or a maximum security facility. Those things, you have to have procedures in place where, if you see the inmate, he's unresponsive, the first thing you do is, bang on the door. If there's still no response from the inmate, you need to immediately notify someone and get some help down there, because you are going in if there is no response from the inmate. You are. Now, do you want to go in by yourself? No one should want to do that, and nor should anyone do that in those type of facilities. Certainly on midnight shift. There's so many instances where it's a bad idea, but you should have a policy in place or a procedure in place to get help there and get help there immediately. And so that you can enter that room, attend to the inmate if it's not just a gesture and it's a real suicide attempt or he's trying to hurt himself. Or two is get in there to resolve the issue. You're not going to stand outside that door for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then finally, open the door, go in there, and the guy's, deceased. The inmate's deceased.
Right.
So
I love what you're saying, because I want people to know, even before medical gets there, custody is going to make sure the scene is safe. That's the key.
Nurse in there. You imagine sending a nurse or a medical person in there without,
Yeah. So I want people to know that we're going to do whatever we can to secure the scene, so medical can then go ahead and do what they need to do. But unless the scene is safe, we can't let medical come in. Before we get to close, there's one last thing here. The reason why we're saying this dialogue is that you would like for this to be natural. So we don't have to, during a code, shift in those priorities. We kind of automatically know, like naturally, like, okay, this person comes in, because the problem is if we're jockeying for position the whole time, because I want it to be one fluid motion. One fluid motion. That to me, I've seen it happen. I've seen it work. I've seen people that have literally I know what to expect from you. You know what to expect from me. We understand each other's role, and it's fluid. It's fluid. When you have it where it's not, the problem is everything stops until it's discovered as to, custody is saying, I got to do this, and medical saying they got to, hey guys, at this point here, make the move. You have to know exactly when it's your turn to step up and when it's your turn to step back and show support. Mind you, I want people to know something too when it comes to conflicting policies. We're not acting on absolutes. We're not saying that because you do this, I can no longer do this. That's not what it means. It means that if I have to shift the priority, because if I have to say, okay, now it's custody's turn or now it's medical's turn, then it's how do we support them? It's not how do we let them go and forget about them. So I want people to know that the resolution for conflict doesn't come from one side letting go and the other side going at it 100%. It's more of, hey, we have to now show support because this department is now in the lead, which tends to bring us in the middle. I saw you writing some notes down. What do you got there, James?
So I liked what you described as far as a smooth transition or a smooth response. People know their roles. They know their responsibilities. Those are all key issues to emergency response, not just these medical ones we're talking about, but having a good local procedure which discusses when emergency is called, who are the designated responders, and that would inform people who are not designated responders, who have other roles to do during an emergency. Drills, it's very, very important to drill with medical, to have Code 99 or medical emergency drills on occasion, and to critique those drills and to talk about it after as to what was positive, what was negative, what could be changed, what's good in our response. And I think if you can drill and practice and people understand their roles and responsibilities, you'll get that response that you're looking for, and you'll minimize mistakes and you'll minimize conflict as well if you can do it. Now, I said a lot there. There's not a lot, you know me with corrections, there's not a lot of time. Everything, takes time and understanding. And, when you do drills, the rest of the facility has to stop what they're doing. Industries gets mad because production goes down and maintenance may, be trying to get work done and they have to stop because of this drill. So, everything in moderation and balance, but, the better you are, I guess, the less you can drill. If your drills are not going good or you've had some problems with your responses to these types of issues, maybe you should drill more. But those are all key things.
I love what you said, because basically we should be passionate about preparation.
Oh,
we should literally be passionate about preparation, because that's the key. That's what gets us in. I got that from the book I was reading, Raise Your Game. A lot of people, again, going with sports athletes, a lot of people that, think that most of the magic occurs when they're out on the course or out on the field. And it's not. It's what they call the unseen hours, the hours in the gym, So I love that, passion behind the preparation. Hey, James, everything like to say in closing?
No, again, just another opportunity to get these finer points out there to the people in the profession that are dealing with these issues. You do a great job. These things are very, very valuable. I think, the message that I tried to get out was that it's got to be a team effort. That warden has got to bring both sides together, whether it's training, drills, designated responders. People have to understand, and we keep going back to this, the big picture.
Yeah, I got to I agree with you 100%. I think a great way to end this dialogue is, I love what you just said. The effort's always going to the effort is always going to be about there. That's what I wanted. The effort's always going to be about bringing people together, not allowing for the departments to stand in isolation and force what should be a we culture into a me culture. And guys, by the way, you have to fight for that every day, because if you don't, the facility's always going to fall back into a me culture. I don't care what anybody says, it's the truth. So good leaders do whatever they can to take advantage of opportunities, even if it's a debrief or whatever it is, to get everybody on the table. And the other added element to this too is when you have those conflicts and you're a middle management and you're trying to figure it out, you can't move forward unless everybody understands where they need to be. And that is where you come in as middle management. You know, if you need to get an outcome that everybody agrees with, and then we can work down from there to basically, what's it called? Reverse engineer. We can reverse engineer from that outcome to decide how we're going to get that outcome. Because if you don't have that outcome, then the people are not going to know where their role is. I mean, that's the key. We did a thing back in the day with the puzzle piece, right? If I don't show people the final picture, then they don't know where the hell their piece belongs. Same thing here. If we go in and try to get it, try to get to the outcome, the problem is we're all going to go in separate directions. Your job as management is to go in and this is what I want, guys. This is what the end result has to be. So tell me how we're going to get there and how we're going to get there together. You know, that's the key.
I got to tell you too, Anthony, okay. I want to admit that I have made that mistake of isolation and getting, not happy with a decision and then leaving a meeting and going back and saying, well, we're going to make sure that security or custody, their needs are met 100%. I've made those mistakes and then the facility stopped moving forward. I didn't make it as a warden, but as a deputy warden or a director of security even, I've made some of those mistakes as a sergeant, but I had a good warden that put me in my place and explained, it's not all about, security, or at the time I was an armory operations or some other position that I held. There's other people that have needs, and this profession is, much bigger than just your area. And, I'm not embarrassed to say that I've made mistakes in that area. And there were lessons well learned.
James, we all have. I remember being a frontline officer, and only like if somebody was a warden, we only thought that the best wardens had to have custody experience. And I've learned by working next to some of the best that that's not always the case. I think the best leaders or the best wardens are people that are humble and open in their position and really look to grow, develop, know that they're not gods, they're not positional leaders, and that they care for their people. Now, with that said, that doesn't just come from custody, that can come from any department. And guys, even when I move up, when I moved up to admin, there's a lot of functions outside of safety and security that has to be handled. So you have to have people that are balanced up top so we can complement each other's weaknesses or areas where we don't have those experiences in. And the great thing is we talked about another show, is if I don't have the experience in something, people were like, well, you know what, Gangi, if you've never been custody, how can you get the respect of custody? Well, I'm gonna show them that I care through my actions. I'm going to show them that I'm willing to learn. I mean, think about this, guys, too. You could have someone that has a lot of custody experience that doesn't even want to listen to you.
Yeah.
So it can go on the extreme on both ends. So my thing is, if I don't have experience something, but I have to oversee a department that does, I got to listen more than I talk. And I got to show them that I care and that I have their better interest. So we'll do one more chance. James, any closing thoughts again?
I worked for this gentleman who, when we were in the policy development and compliance unit together, he came up through the program side. I thought he had the best security mind of just about anyone that I've met in the profession. And that's nationwide. And it was harder for him. I can remember him, laying out some, a process, talking about a process, discussing a process and how it should be done. And I could see in the facial expressions, the people listening weren't listening. And then I would go in and say the same exact thing, and I'd have their attention like nobody's business. It was unfair. He worked hard at it, and he was good. And he ended up with a very successful career. But That's a very good point. Very good point. It's a lot of hard work for the people in corrections that don't come up on the security side to get that. I don't know if I want to say respect, but to earn, have that influence over the people to get what we need to get done. It's a difficult job.
As I said, I think the key is being humble and be willing to
Yeah.
grow no matter what position you're in. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video.